It was one of those nights in Seattle when the rain didn't fall in sheets, but hung in the air, like a heavy curtain clinging to your skin, your clothes, your thoughts. I had just stepped out of the black Lincoln parked outside the Fairmont, adjusting the collar of my wool coat when I saw them. At first, it was just a woman struggling to keep 3 kids close as they shuffled on the wet sidewalk. She had one hand gripping an umbrella, and the other balancing 2 grocery bags, while her eyes darted between her phone and the street. One boy kept tugging at her coat, eager to step into a puddle. I should have looked away. I should have kept walking. But something about the tilt of her head, the way she scolded the little one, soft but firm, froze me in place. Then I saw their faces. The kids couldn't have been more than 6 or 7. 2 boys and a girl. But the boy standing closest to the curb, he had my jawline, my nose, my deep-set eyes. I swear for a second, I thought I was staring at an old photograph of myself as a child. My stomach dropped. The woman bent down to tie the shoelace of the girl, and for the briefest moment her face came into view under the glow of the street lamp. A name clawed its way up from a part of my memory I'd buried deep. Hannah. The syllables caught in my throat. 6 years. 6 damn years. Since I last saw her, since I walked out of her tiny apartment in Boston, with a promise I never kept. The boy with my eyes tugged on her sleeve. "Mom," he whispered, pointing toward me. "Why's that man staring at us?" Hannah straightened up slowly, her gaze following her son's finger, until it landed on me, and then she froze. I saw it, recognition flaring in her eyes, followed by a wall slamming shut. Her lips pressed into a thin line as she tightened her grip on the grocery bags. "Come on," she said to the kids, her voice low but urgent. "Our ride's almost here." She didn't wave, didn't smile, just turned and ushered them toward the edge of the sidewalk as the headlights of an approaching car cut through the mist. I wanted to call out, to say something, anything, but my tongue felt heavy. By the time I took a hesitant step forward, the Uber had arrived. The kids clambered in first, their tiny hands leaving prints on the fogged windows. Hannah slid in last, casting one final glance at me. There was no warmth in that look, only questions and anger. The car door shut with a muted thud, and in seconds the taillights faded into the rainy night. I stood there drenched and breathless, my world tilting. 3 kids, 6 years, her face, and all I could think was, what if they're mine? I didn't move. The rain soaked through my coat, cold and insistent, but my body felt numb. My shoes were rooted to the pavement as the Uber vanished into the night, its taillights bleeding red into the wet asphalt. Hannah. 6 years. 6 years since I'd said her name out loud. I thought I'd buried her face somewhere unreachable in a corner of my mind I never dared to visit. But now, in the dim glow of a Seattle street lamp, it all came roaring back. It was supposed to be a clean break. That's what I told myself back then. 6 years ago, I was standing in the cramped kitchen of her apartment in Boston, staring at my packed suitcase. The clock on the wall ticked too loud. Hannah leaned against the counter barefoot, her hands wrapped around a chipped coffee mug. She looked tired. Not the kind of tired that sleep fixes, but the kind that comes from loving someone who's halfway out the door. "You're really going to LA, aren't you?" she asked quietly. I couldn't meet her eyes. I busied myself with my phone, scrolling through emails that didn't need my attention. "It's just an opportunity," I muttered. 6 months. Maybe a year. She nodded slowly. "That's what you said last time." This time felt different, though. Bigger. The offer from the hospital in Los Angeles wasn't just a promotion. It was a golden ticket. head of cardiothoracic surgery at 34. Every doctor's dream. But at what cost, Evan? She said, her voice catching. You can't keep asking me to wait. I looked up then, and her eyes, green and fierce, cut straight through me. I'm not asking you to, I said too quickly, too coldly. The silence that followed was deafening. When she finally spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. Then this is it, isn't it? I wanted to tell her no. To drop my bag, pull her into my arms, promise I'd stay this time. But the words never came. Instead, I turned to the door. I'm sorry, Hannah. I don't know if she replied. The sound of the door clicking shut drowned out everything else. Now standing on a rainy Seattle sidewalk years later, I wondered if she still remembered that moment as clearly as I did. Maybe she had replayed it in her mind too. Her in that kitchen, me walking away, leaving her in the quiet, with nothing but an empty coffee mug, sus, and a heart full of questions. And those kids. God, what if they weren't just hers? What if they were ours? I don't know how long I stood there watching the taillights dissolve into the rain. My fingers twitched at my side, itching to reach out to call her name Hannah. But I didn't. I took one step forward, then another. The sound of my shoes splashing in shallow puddles echoed louder than the horns blaring in the distance. My breath came in tight, uneven pulls. 6 years ago, I'd left her behind with nothing but a hollow apology. And now, somehow, she was here, with 3 kids clinging to her coat. I was close enough now to see them more clearly. The boy with the sharp jawline, so much like my own when I was that age, was holding onto the strap of her worn leather bag. The girl had the same furrowed brow Hannah used to make when she was concentrating. The youngest, a boy no taller than her hip, was squinting up at me through the drizzle. His small hand tugged at her sleeve. "Mom," he whispered, voice muffled by the hum of traffic. Why's that man staring at us? Hannah froze. Slowly, almost reluctantly, she followed his gaze until her eyes locked on mine. For a second, neither of us moved. Her expression shifted so quickly I barely caught it. Recognition, then shock, then something sharper, anger, maybe fear. I opened my mouth to speak, but the words snagged in my throat. Hannah. The name never made it past my lips. She straightened, pulling the kids closer. "Come on," she said softly but firmly, not breaking eye contact. "Let's move. Our ride's here." I took another step, my voice finally working. Hannah. But she was already turning away, ushering the kids toward the curb where a silver Toyota had stopped. The driver popped the trunk as she juggled the grocery bags, the umbrella, and 3 wriggling bodies. Her movements were quick, efficient, like a woman who'd done this 100 times before without help. I hesitated on the sidewalk, rain dripping from my hair into my eyes. Part of me wanted to rush forward to demand answers. Are they mine? But another part, the cowardly part, told me to stay still. What if they weren't mine? What if they were... And she didn't want me anywhere near them. The youngest boy twisted in his seat as the car door closed, his big eyes peeking out through the fogged window. I raised a hand instinctively. He didn't wave back. The Toyota pulled away with a low hiss, tires slicing through rainwater. And just like that, they were gone. I stood there for what felt like hours. The street emptied, the cold seeping into my bones. 6 years ago, I'd told myself leaving was the right thing, that I needed to build a future first, before I could give anyone else a place in it. But as I stared at the empty road, one truth settled in my chest. Like a stone, I'd built my empire on the ruins of her trust. And maybe I'd left more than love behind that night. Maybe I'd left a family. The apartment was quiet. Too quiet for a place with floor-to-ceiling windows, overlooking the glowing sprawl of downtown Seattle. I sat there in the leather armchair, a glass of bourbon untouched in my hand. The city outside was alive, horns, sirens, the hum of a world that never stopped. But in here, all I could hear was her voice from 6 years ago. You can't have it both ways, Evan. Not me, and this. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling, and let my mind drift to the night it all began. To Boston, 6 years earlier. The boardroom smelled of polished wood and expensive ink. My signature had just dried on the contract spread out in front of me, head of cardiac innovation for Crestline Medical, the kind of title that came with a corner office, a 7-figure salary, and access to research budgets most surgeons only dreamed of. Everyone shook my hand, congratulated me, even toasted with champagne. I smiled. Nodded played the part. But the whole time a single thought gnawed at me. What will Hannah think she'd been patient when I worked double shifts, supportive when I'd missed her birthday twice because of emergency surgeries? But this was different. Crestline's offer meant moving to Los Angeles. Long hours, endless demands. And I knew deep down Hannah would hate the idea. That night, I found her in our tiny apartment sitting cross-legged on the floor with a mug of tea. She'd lit candles, her hair pulled back in that loose knot I always loved. "Hey," she said, smiling up at me. "How'd it go?" I hesitated, holding the offer letter like it might burn me. "They want me," I said finally. "Lead surgeon. It's huge." Her smile faltered just a little. "That's great," she said, but her fingers tightened around the mug. "Where? L.A.?" The silence stretched between us like a taut wire. She didn't yell. Hannah never did. Instead, she spoke softly, almost tenderly. "Evan, do you remember what you promised me when we moved in here? That you'd find balance? That you wouldn't let the job swallow you whole?" I did remember. I just didn't think it would be this hard to keep that promise. "This is my shot," I said. "All the years of training, the sacrifices. It's for this." Her eyes glistened in the candlelight. "I never asked you to sacrifice us." I didn't have an answer. Back in the present, I took a sip of bourbon. It burned going down, but not enough to erase the memory. That night, I chose ambition over love. And now, staring at the rain on the glass, I wondered if I'd also chosen ambition over 3 children I didn't even know existed. I remember the night she told me. It wasn't dramatic. No shouting, no tears. At least not at first. It was late, and I'd just come back from another 16-hour shift. The apartment smelled faintly of lavender and takeout, and the only light came from the kitchen where she sat waiting. Hannah. Her hair was damp from a shower, her oversized sweater slipping off one shoulder. In front of her was a mug of untouched tea. "Evan," she said quietly, "we need to talk." I was too tired to notice the weight in her voice. I set down my bag and rubbed at my face. "Can it wait until morning? I've got an early consult." "It can't wait." There was a tremor in her words that made me freeze. She took a deep breath, and when she spoke again, her voice was steady. "I'm pregnant." The room seemed to shrink around me. Pregnant. Her eyes searched mine, looking for a flicker of joy, of relief, of anything. But I didn't smile. I didn't even reach for her. Instead, I leaned against the counter, my pulse pounding. "You're sure?" Hannah flinched like I'd struck her. "Yes," she whispered. I nodded slowly, forcing air into my lungs. Okay. That's a lot. It's not a lot. It's a life, Evan." She stood now, gripping the edge of the counter. "I know this isn't what we planned, but planned." I cut in sharper than I intended. "Hannah, I'm about to take on a fellowship. I've got surgeries booked 6 months out. A baby. I don't even know how we'd make that work." Her shoulders sagged, but her gaze didn't waver. "I don't need a plan. I need you. We can figure the rest out together." I looked away, staring at the tile floor like it held the answers I didn't have. "I can't do this right now," I said finally. "Not with everything on my plate. Maybe it'd be better if we waited." Her voice cracked, and for the first time I saw her mask slip. "You think this is something we can pause, Evan? This isn't a meeting you can reschedule. This is our child. I ran a hand through my hair, frustrated. "I need time to think." Hannah laughed then, but it was a hollow sound. Time. That's all you've ever needed. Time to finish med school. Time to make partner. Time to figure things out. But somehow, there's never time for me. Her words hit harder than I expected, but I didn't fight back. I didn't even stay. I grabbed my coat and left, telling myself I needed airspace clarity, anything, to escape the suffocating weight of what she'd just said. "Ifosong setu stotirhas." That was the last night we spoke face to face, and now, 6 years later, I couldn't stop thinking about her standing alone in that kitchen, hands on her stomach, whispering to herself for courage I didn't give her. The clock on my nightstand blinked 3:12 a.m. I hadn't slept. The rain had stopped hours ago, but its rhythm still echoed in my head, like a slow drum beat, reminding me of what I'd seen. Her face, those kids, and the look in her eyes when she recognized me. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the glass of water in my hand. My apartment was silent, except for the low hum of the heater. I'd spent 6 years building this life, this view, this address, these walls of polished concrete and glass. But tonight, it all felt hollow. If those kids are mine, then somewhere out there are 6 birthdays I missed, 6 Christmas mornings, 6 first steps, first words, first fevers when she sat up all night alone. And I wasn't there. Maybe she never wanted me to be. The thought burned more than I expected. I closed my eyes, pinching the bridge of my nose, trying to silence the storm in my head. What if I find her, and she tells me to leave? What if those kids look at me the way Hannah did tonight, like I'm just a stranger in their world? Or worse, what if they aren't mine? That should have been a relief, but it wasn't, because deep down, a small voice kept whispering the truth. I wasn't ready to say out loud, I wanted them to be mine. Not because of guilt, not even because it would make walking away easier, but because for the first time in years, I wanted something more than the next deal, the next promotion, the next title on my office door. I wanted a second chance. By the time the first light of dawn bled into the sky, my decision was made. I grabbed my phone, opened a blank search bar, and stared at the cursor blinking back at me. Hannah Brooks. Would she still use that name? My fingers hovered over the screen. If I found her, if I reached out, there'd be no going back. No hiding behind excuses or 12-hour shifts. I took a deep breath, hit search, and watched as her name appeared at the top of the results. Same city, Same green eyes in the profile photo. And just below her address, a single thought struck me like a punch to the chest. She's lived here all along, while I was too busy living everywhere but where I should have been. I set the phone down my palms, slick with sweat. Whatever her answer was, whatever those kids meant, I had to know. Even if the truth destroyed me. The drive felt longer than it was. Hannah's neighborhood lay just outside Seattle, where the city gave way to quiet streets, lined with modest two-story homes and towering evergreens. My hands gripped the steering wheel tighter. The closer I got, knuckles pale under the morning light. Every turn of the tires brought me nearer to the thing I'd been running from for years. I parked across the street, killing the engine. For a moment, I just sat there staring at her house. It wasn't anything grand white siding a small porch, a red tricycle tipped over in the front yard, but something about it felt heavy. Like every memory I'd pushed aside was waiting for me behind that door. My heart pounded against my ribs. I'd walked into operating rooms calmer than this. What was I even going to say? Hi, Hannah. I know I left you 6 years ago and never called, but I'd like to meet the 3 kids who look exactly like me. The words tasted bitter, even in my imagination. I took a deep breath, checked my reflection in the rearview mirror, and stepped out into the crisp air. Each footstep up her walkway felt like a drumbeat. My palms were damp. I wiped them against my coat, forcing myself to the porch. The tricycle creaked in the wind. Somewhere inside, I thought I heard faint laughter, children's voices. I froze. For a split second, I almost turned back. But then I thought of the boy, with my eyes staring at me through the rain-streaked car window. If I walked away again, I might never see him or any of them ever again. My fist hovered over the door. 1 knock. That's all it would take. But my fingers felt leaden, my chest tight. This wasn't like signing another contract or closing another deal. This was real, messy, unforgiving. Finally, I forced my knuckles forward and rapped softly against the wood. The sound seemed to echo louder than it should have, and then I waited, my breath caught somewhere between hope and fear. The door creaked open, and there she was, Hannah. For a moment, the world narrowed to the few feet of space between us. She hadn't changed as much as I thought she would. Her hair was a little shorter now, brushed back in a loose knot. Her face carried faint lines that hadn't been there before, but her eyes, those sharp green eyes, were exactly the same, and they froze me where I stood. Hannah's gaze swept over me quickly, then hardened. Her hand gripped the edge of the door knuckles, pale. "What are you doing here, Evan?" she asked, her voice low, steady. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out at first. The speech I'd rehearsed in the car evaporated like mist. I needed to see you, I managed finally. And the kids. Her jaw tightened. You don't get to say that. I swallowed hard. I know I don't deserve it. I know what I did leaving like that. There aren't words to make it right. But I saw you last night. I saw them. And I can't just walk away again. Hannah's eyes flickered for the briefest second, but her expression didn't soften. You've had 6 years, Evan. 6 years of silence, and now you're here out of the blue asking about them. Her voice cracked slightly on the last word, but she caught herself quickly. I need to know, I said quietly. Are they mine? The air between us seemed to thicken. Hannah exhaled through her nose, shaking her head slightly. You want an answer? She asked, her tone sharp. Why now? Why not 6 years ago when I called you, When I emailed, when I even showed up at your office begging for 5 minutes. Her words hit harder than I expected. I didn't see any of that, I said hoarsely. I swear to you, Hannah, I didn't know. No, she interrupted, her voice rising. You didn't want to know. You were too busy chasing whatever it is you thought would make you whole. I stared at her, unable to argue because she was right. Hannah took a deep breath, her fingers loosening slightly on the doorframe. Yes, Evan. They're yours. All 3 of them. The words landed like a blow to the chest. For a second, I couldn't breathe. I want to meet them, I said softly. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I need to try. Hannah's lips pressed into a thin line. This isn't about what you need, she said. They don't know you. To them, you're just a stranger at the door. Then let me change that, I pleaded. Please, 1 chance. That's all I ask. She studied me for a long moment, her eyes searching for something, guilt, sincerity, maybe both. Finally, she spoke. Tomorrow, 5 p.m. You come here. No suit, no speeches. And if you so much as make them uncomfortable, Evan, I'll never let you near them again. I nodded quickly, relief flooding my chest. I'll be here. Good, she said flatly. Now go. I don't want them seeing you yet. And just like that, she closed the door. Her words still rang in my ears as I stood there on the porch. Tomorrow, 5 p.m. 1 mistake, Evan, and you're gone. She hadn't raised her voice. She didn't need to. The steel in her tone cut sharper than any yell could. I wanted to say something, thank her promise I'd do everything right, but the door was already closed. And maybe that was for the best. I let out a shaky breath and turned to go my steps, slow, deliberate, like I was walking across thin ice. But as I passed the front window, something inside caught my eye. A guitar. It leaned against the wall in the living room, worn and faded, but still standing. I remembered that guitar. 6 years ago, Hannah used to play for me on nights when we were both too exhausted to talk. She wasn't a professional, just a girl with a soft voice and calloused fingertips. But the sound of her singing filled every corner of that tiny Boston apartment in a way no amount of success ever could. Sometimes she'd pause mid-song and catch me staring. What she'd ask, half smiling. Nothing I'd say. Just, don't stop. And I meant it, but I'd stopped listening long before I walked out that door. Back in the present, I tore my eyes away from the window, swallowing the lump in my throat. Tomorrow at 5 p.m. I'd see them. 3 kids I didn't know how to talk to. 3 lives that had gone on without me. What if I froze? What if they hated me? What if I didn't know how to be anything other than the man I'd been for so long, focused cold, a stranger to softness? My phone buzzed in my pocket, pulling me out of the spiral. It was a calendar reminder board meeting with Crestline execs. 5:30 p.m. I silenced it. For once in my life, I wasn't going to let work come first. When I got back to my apartment, the city lights sprawled out below me like a galaxy. I poured a glass of bourbon but didn't touch it. Hannah's voice played over and over in my head. This isn't about what you need. They don't know you. 1 mistake and you're gone. She wasn't bluffing. I could feel it in her eyes. Tomorrow wasn't about me. It wasn't about redemption or second chances. It was about them. And if I wanted even the faintest chance of being part of their world, I'd have to prove I deserved it. At 4:59 p.m., I stood on Hannah's porch again. No suit, no watch, no pre-rehearsed speeches, just me.
A man trying to swallow the knot in his throat, holding 3 carefully wrapped boxes in my hands. The sound of small voices inside made my chest tighten. Remember Hannah had said the night before, her eyes hard but her voice steady. They don't owe you anything. This isn't about making yourself feel better. One wrong move and you're gone. I nodded then. I nodded now too. The door opened before I could knock. Hannah stood there, her hair pulled back, wearing a simple gray sweater and jeans. She didn't smile. "They're in the living room," she said quietly. "Don't overwhelm them. Just take it slow."
I stepped inside my palms, sweating around the gift boxes. And there they were. 3 small faces turned toward me from the couch. The first boy Liam I'd later learn jumped to his feet, almost immediately, energy radiating off him like a spark. "Are you the guy Mom said is coming over?" he asked. His brother Noah stayed seated but leaned forward wide-eyed. "You look kind of like us." And then there was Finn, the smallest of the 3. He didn't move, didn't speak. He just sat there with his arms crossed, his dark eyes studying me like he was trying to solve a puzzle. I cleared my throat, forcing a small smile. "Hi, I'm Evan. And, I brought you something." Liam's eyes lit up as I handed him the first box. He tore into it without hesitation, pulling out a miniature soccer ball. "Cool," he shouted, bouncing it on the floor. Noah accepted his box more carefully, unwrapping it with slow, deliberate movements. Inside was a science kit, tiny beakers, colorful powders, and a booklet of experiments. "Whoa," he whispered. "You knew I liked science." I chuckled softly. "Just a lucky guess." Finn's box sat untouched in his lap. "It's okay," I said gently. "You don't have to open it right now." But after a long pause, he peeled back the paper to reveal a small sketch pad and a set of pencils. He glanced at me briefly, then down at the gift. "Thanks," he muttered, almost too soft to hear. I lowered myself into the armchair across from them, careful not to make any sudden moves. "You know I began when I was your age. I loved building things. I once tried to make a rocket out of soda bottles and duct tape. It didn't end well." Liam laughed. Noah leaned closer, intrigued. Even Finn's lips twitched slightly. It wasn't much, but it was a start. I never thought silence could be this loud. I sat there clutching my hands together, while 3 pairs of eyes weighed me in entirely different ways. Liam had no problem breaking the tension. He tossed the little soccer ball into the air, catching it with both hands. "Can we play outside later?" he asked. Maybe Hannah said from the kitchen doorway. "Let's just take things slow for now, okay?" Liam nodded but shot me a grin anyway. "I bet I can kick harder than you." I smiled back, grateful for his energy. "You probably can. I haven't played in years." Noah, on the other hand, wasn't so quick to let me off the hook. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. His curious brown eyes locked on mine. "So, where have you been all this time?" he asked bluntly. The question hit like a punch to the gut. Hannah shifted uncomfortably, but she didn't step in. "I was working," I said carefully. "Far away, and I didn't know." I stopped realizing too late how flimsy that sounded. "You didn't know about us," Noah pressed. I shook my head. "No. If I had, I would have been here sooner." He studied me for a long moment, like he was trying to decide whether to believe me. Finn hadn't said a word. The little boy sat on the edge of the couch, hugging the sketch pad I'd given him against his chest. His eyes darted to the window, to his brothers, anywhere but me. "Do you like to draw?" I asked gently. Finn gave the faintest nod, but didn't look up. "What do you like to draw?" I tried again. "Stuff," he muttered. Every part of me wanted to push harder to get him to open up. But Hannah's voice echoed in my head. "One mistake, and you're gone." So I didn't push. I leaned back slightly, trying to steady my tone. "Well, I can't draw to save my life," I admitted. "But I can build a mean Lego spaceship." That earned me a tiny glance from Finn, just a flicker, but it felt like a victory. Meanwhile, Liam dribbled the ball across the carpet and stopped in front of me. "Do you like superheroes?" he asked. "Sure," I said. "Who's your favorite Captain Nova?" he shouted. "He's the best. He flies super fast and Captain Nova's not real." Noah interrupted. "He's just from a comic." "Still cool," I said, smiling. "When I was your age, I wanted to be a superhero too." Liam's eyes widened. "You did?" "Yeah," I said. "But I didn't have a cape. Or laser eyes." Noah smirked slightly at that. Even Finn's lips twitched just barely. For the first time all evening, I felt the tiniest crack in the wall between us. It wasn't much, but it was something. The visit had gone. Better than I expected. Liam was already asking if I'd come back to play soccer. Noah had been quieter, but at least he'd stopped glaring at me. And Finn, well, Finn hadn't warmed up, but he hadn't run from the room either. That felt like progress. Hannah glanced at the clock. "All right, boys. It's almost dinner. Say goodbye." Liam bounced the soccer ball in his hands. "Bye. But you're coming back right, if it's okay with your mom," I said, shooting Hannah a cautious look. Noah tilted his head. "You will, won't you?" I nodded. "If you'll have me." I got up slowly, not wanting to leave, but knowing I had no choice. As I stepped toward the door, I heard a small voice behind me. "Mom." It was Finn. His words were barely louder than a whisper, but in the quiet room they carried like a gunshot. Can he not come back? I froze mid-step. My chest tightened, and for a second I couldn't breathe. Hannah crouched down beside him, smoothing a hand over his hair. "Finn," she said gently. "It's okay." But he kept his eyes on the floor, clutching his sketchpad to his chest like a shield. "I don't want him here." I forced myself to keep moving, though every step felt heavier than the last. At the door I turned back, trying to catch Finn's gaze. "Bye, Finn," I said softly. He didn't answer, didn't even look at me. Outside, the cool evening air hit me like a slap. I stood on the porch for a long moment, staring at the fading light over the treetops. Part of me wanted to be angry, to tell myself he was just a kid. He didn't know me yet. He couldn't understand. But the truth was simpler. He was right not to trust me. As I walked back to my car, Liam's laughter echoed faintly through the door. But all I could hear was Finn's voice. Can he not come back? The words looped in my head until they became a dull ache in my chest. And for the first time in years, I realized how much I wanted to be someone worth coming back for. If there's one thing I've learned in surgery, it's that precision takes time. You can't rush delicate work. And maybe the same was true here. So I showed up. I was there the next Saturday for Liam's soccer game, standing awkwardly on the sidelines with the other parents. Liam spotted me almost instantly and waved so hard I thought his arm might fall off. "Watch me score, Evan," he shouted. I smiled. I'm watching. And when he did score one clumsy but determined kick into the goal, I was the first one on my feet, clapping and cheering like he'd just won the World Cup. The grin on his face lit up the entire field. So, 2 days later, I sat cross-legged on Hannah's living room floor, helping Noah glue together pieces of cardboard and wire for his science fair project. "It's supposed to be a model of the solar system," he explained, brow furrowed in concentration. "But the orbits keep falling apart. Let's try reinforcing them with these toothpicks," I suggested. He eyed me warily for a moment, then handed me the glue. "Okay, but be careful," he said. "This has to survive the bus ride to school." We worked in silence for a while, and I noticed the way his shoulders relaxed just slightly when our fingers brushed over a ball of styrofoam. Progress. But Finn was still a closed door. Every time I visited, he'd retreat to a corner with his sketchpad head-bowed pencil, moving furiously across the page. If I asked what he was drawing, he'd shrug. If I offered to sit with him, he'd mumble, "I'm busy." Hannah told me not to push. So I didn't. But every time I caught a glimpse of his small hands clutching that sketchpad like it was a life raft, my chest tightened. I wanted to reach him more than anything. As I drove home one evening, Noah's solar system model still fresh in my mind, I realized something. This wasn't going to be a sprint. It was a marathon, and if I wanted to prove I deserved a place in their lives, especially Finn's, I had to keep showing up. Every single day, if that's what it took. The text came through just as I was walking into the boardroom. "Finn's recital at 6. Don't be late." I stared at the screen for a long moment, her words burning like a warning in my chest. Hannah didn't do second chances. I knew that now. And Finn. If I missed this, I might never get through to him. But when I glanced up, the room was already filling. 12 people in tailored suits took their seats at the long glass table, murmuring about projections, acquisitions, and quarterly reports. At the head of the table, Mr. Lawton, our lead investor, cleared his throat. "All right, people, let's get started." The meeting was critical. This wasn't just any pitch. It was a $300 million expansion deal that could launch our firm into an entirely new league. The kind of opportunity I'd once dreamed about. But as the first slides flashed on the screen, my mind drifted. I pictured a small auditorium, rows of parents sitting with phones out ready to record, kids fidgeting nervously in little folding chairs, and Finn, sitting at the piano, his tiny hands poised over the keys. Would he look for me in the crowd? Would he scan the rows, hoping I'd kept my promise? "Evan." My head snapped up. Mr. Lawton was staring at me. "You'll walk us through the Q4 forecasts." "Yes, yes, of course," I said, forcing a smile as I reached for my notes. But my hand hesitated over the paper. The clock on the wall read 12 p.m. If I left now, I could just make it across town in time. But if I walked out, the deal would collapse. There were no reschedules with men like Lawton. And once, that would have been enough for me to stay. I thought of Hannah's voice the night she agreed to let me meet the kids. One mistake, and you're gone. and Finn's small, guarded face. Can he not come back? And for the first time in my career, I stood up in the middle of a boardroom meeting. "I'm sorry," I said. "I have to step out." Lofton's brows shot up. "Excuse me. There's something more important I need to do." "You're walking out of a multi-million-dollar deal?" he asked incredulously. I didn't answer. I just grabbed my coat and left the sound of chairs scraping and voices rising behind me. As I jogged to the elevator, I checked my phone. 5:18 p.m. If traffic wasn't terrible, I might just make it. Might. But even if I didn't, at least Finn would know I tried. The streets of Seattle blurred past in streaks of gray and gold as I sped toward the school. Every red light felt like a curse. Every minute on the clock felt like a lifetime slipping through my fingers. By the time I pulled into the parking lot, it was 5:58 p.m. I sprinted across the asphalt, barely noticing the cold drizzle that had started falling. "Please, don't let me be too late." The small auditorium was already packed when I slipped inside my coat, dripping rainwater onto the polished floor. On stage, a teacher tapped the microphone. Next up, Finn Brooks, performing Claire de Lune. My heart jumped. I scanned the rows of parents, my eyes landing on Hannah, sitting near the aisle. She saw me, her brows arching in surprise. But she didn't wave. She just nodded almost imperceptibly toward an empty seat beside her. I slid into it just as Finn walked across the stage. He looked so small under the bright lights. His dark hair fell over his forehead as he adjusted the bench and placed his tiny hands on the keys. For a moment, he glanced at the audience scanning the faces, and then his eyes met mine. I held my breath. Finn froze, his fingers hovering above the keys. I smiled softly, nervously, and raised a thumb in silent encouragement. For a heartbeat, he just stared. And then to my shock, the corners of his mouth lifted. A small, shy smile. The first note floated out like a whisper, then another, and soon the melody filled the room, delicate and uncertain, but beautiful in its own way. I didn't dare blink. I didn't want to miss a second. When the last note faded, the audience erupted in polite applause. But for me, it felt like the roar of a stadium. Finn gave a quick bow, his eyes darting to me once more, before he walked off stage. That smile, that tiny, hesitant smile, was still there. And I knew in that moment, no deal, no boardroom, no title in the world could compare. For most of my adult life, home had been a penthouse on the Upper East Side, floor-to-ceiling windows, sleek marble floors, a view of Manhattan that made every visitor stop and stare. It was everything I thought I wanted. Until now. Now all I could see when I looked at that view was how far it kept me from what mattered most. The decision came quietly, almost like breathing. I called my broker the morning after Finn's recital. "List it," I said simply. He sputtered on the other end of the line. "Evan, are you sure you've barely owned this place 3 years? I'm sure I cut in. I need to be in Seattle full time." There was a pause. "Is this about work?" "No," I said. "It's about family." 2 words I'd never put first in a sentence before. By the end of the week, my penthouse was in escrow. I rented a modest townhouse in Ballard, close enough to Hannah's place that I could be there in minutes if she called. The ceilings were lower. The floors creaked. There was no doorman or concierge. But for the first time in years, it felt like a place I wanted to come home to. When I told Hannah about the move, she didn't smile. She just raised an eyebrow. "You're really leaving New York?" she asked. Arms crossed. "I already left," I said. "This isn't temporary." "And why now?" Her voice was calm, but there was steel underneath. "Because I spent too many years chasing the wrong things," I said softly. "I don't want to be the guy who only shows up for recitals. I want to be here, for real." Hannah studied me for a long moment. "You can't just undo 6 years of absence with a few grand gestures, Evan," she said finally. "I know," I admitted, "but I'm not asking for your trust right now. I'm asking for the chance to earn it." She looked away out the kitchen window where Liam and Noah were kicking a ball back and forth. "You're not the only one who has to be convinced," she murmured. "Finn still thinks you're going to disappear." Her words stung, but they were fair. As I walked back to my car, I glanced toward the house one last time. Through the window, I caught a glimpse of Finn at the table, sketching something in his notebook. I didn't know if I could break through his walls, but for the first time, I knew I'd stay as long as it took. It started with a knock on my door. I'd just settled into my new place boxes still stacked in corners, the faint smell of fresh paint in the air, when Hannah appeared on the porch, her face pale under the dim porch light. "It's Finn," she said softly. "He's burning up." Minutes later, I was in their house, climbing the stairs 2 at a time. Finn lay curled in bed, cheeks flushed crimson strands of damp hair sticking to his forehead. His tiny frame shivered beneath the blanket despite the warmth in the room. I knelt beside him, feeling a rush of helplessness. "Hey, buddy," I whispered. "You're okay. I'm here." His eyes fluttered open for a second. "You came," he croaked. "Of course I came." My throat tightened. "I'm not going anywhere." Hannah stood in the doorway, holding a damp washcloth. I called the pediatrician. They said to alternate Tylenol and cool compresses for now. If his fever doesn't drop in an hour, we take him to urgent care. "I'll stay," I said, without hesitation. Hannah hesitated for a beat, then nodded. "Wake me if he worsens," she murmured, her voice tight. "I'll try to rest for a bit." Hours crawled. I sat there in the dark, holding Finn's small hand in mine, feeling the heat radiate off his skin. Every so often he stirred and mumbled something incoherent. Once, I thought I heard him whisper, "Don't leave." "I won't," I whispered back, brushing the damp hair from his forehead. "Not this time. Not ever again." I thought about all the nights I wasn't there, all the skinned knees I didn't bandage, all the bad dreams I didn't chase away. I'd missed so much, but I didn't have to miss this. Around 3 a.m., his breathing evened out the fever finally starting to break. I exhaled a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding and let my forehead rest gently against the edge of the mattress. Finn's fingers still gripped mine loosely, even in sleep. It wasn't much, but it felt like a promise. When Hannah peeked in at dawn, she found me still there, slouched in the chair, Finn's hand in mine. "You stayed," she said softly. "Where else would I be?" For the first time her lips curved, not quite a smile, but close. The first light of dawn slipped through the curtains, soft and golden. I shifted in the chair. my back aching from hours in the same position. Finn was still asleep, his small hand warm in mine. I didn't want to move, didn't want to break whatever fragile thread connected us in that quiet room. But then his eyelids fluttered. Slowly, he blinked up at me, his dark eyes hazy, but clear enough to recognize me. "You're still here," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "I told you I'd stay," I said softly, managing a small smile. His lips curved faintly, and he squeezed my hand weakly. For a long moment, he just lay there staring at me like he was trying to memorize my face. And then, barely audible, he murmured, "Thanks for staying, Dad." The word hit me like a wave. Dad. My throat tightened. My chest felt like it might split open. I'd spent years hearing people call me Sir Boss Mr. Lawson, but nothing felt as heavy or as sacred as that one word. I swallowed hard, forcing back the burn in my eyes. "You don't have to thank me," I whispered. "It's where I'm supposed to be." Finn let out a tiny sigh and closed his eyes again, still clutching my fingers. As I sat there watching his small chest rise and fall, one thought echoed in my mind. This wasn't just a second chance for him to let me in. It was a second chance for me to be the kind of man he could depend on, and I wasn't going to waste it. The sun climbed higher, painting the walls in shades of orange and gold, but in that moment, it felt like the beginning of something even brighter. I'd stood in boardrooms before. I'd pitched billion-dollar ideas to skeptical investors. But this time felt different, because this wasn't about profit margins or market share. This was about family. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began pacing slowly in front of the massive conference table. "We've spent years building an empire that demands sacrifice. Late nights, missed birthdays, lost weekends. What if we built something different? A campus designed not just for work, but for life. Flexible schedules, on-site childcare, wellness programs for employees and their families." I clicked to the next slide. Campus Family First. The rendering showed a sleek, modern complex, surrounded by green spaces and playgrounds. "This isn't charity," I said. "It's an investment. Happier employees are more productive, more loyal, and frankly, it's the right thing to do." And the silence was deafening. Then Mr. Harkins, one of our most vocal board members, leaned back in his chair and scoffed. "You're throwing millions away on playgrounds and yoga classes?" Others murmured in agreement. "This isn't a nonprofit," Evan Harkins continued. "We're here to make money, not babysit employees' kids." I took a deep breath, gripping the edge of the podium. "I used to think like you," I admitted, that success meant squeezing every drop out of people, no matter the cost. But that cost is too high. I've seen it now in my own life. If we don't change, we'll keep losing our best people to burnout, to competitors who treat them like human beings. Victoria. My operations director spoke up hesitantly. Even if we agreed this would require a massive shift in our budget. The Singapore expansion alone. "I'm asking you to look beyond quarterly numbers," I interrupted. "This is about the next decade." Harkins slammed his hand on the table. This is madness. You've gone soft, Evan. You're risking everything we built because of some midlife crisis. The words stung. But I didn't flinch. Call it what you want, I said calmly. But I'm not asking permission to care about the people who keep this company alive. I'm asking if you have the courage to build something that lasts. Son dos. The room fell silent again. I didn't know if I'd won them over, but for the first time, I didn't care about their approval as much as I cared about doing the right thing. After the meeting, the boardroom emptied out in a wave of expensive shoes and hushed voices. I stayed behind, staring out the floor-to-ceiling windows as rain streaked down the glass. Seattle looked gray, heavy, almost suffocating. But in my mind, I wasn't in that high-rise tower. I was back in Hannah's living room watching Finn at the piano, hearing his small voice say, "Thanks for staying, Dad." That one moment mattered more than any deal I'd ever closed. Evan. I turned to see Victoria standing in the doorway. "They're furious," she said quietly. "Half the board thinks you've lost focus. They're talking about finding someone, more aligned with shareholder interests." "Let them," I said. She frowned. "You've built this company from nothing. You're really willing to walk away, if it means keeping my family. Yes." I remembered what it felt like to walk out on Hannah 6 years ago, to tell myself I was doing it for us while boarding planes and signing contracts and convincing the world I had it all together. It was a lie. I wasn't doing it for us. I was doing it for me, and I wouldn't make the same mistake twice. Later that evening, I sat in my car outside Hannah's house, engine off hands, gripping the steering wheel. Through the rain-speckled windshield, I saw silhouettes moving inside Liam and Noah, chasing each other with plastic lightsabers, Finn curled up on the couch with his sketch pad. A whole universe I almost missed. When I finally walked in, Hannah looked up from the kitchen counter. "You're late," she said softly. "I know." She studied my face. "The company. They're voting tomorrow," I admitted. "If they reject the Family First project, they'll probably push me out." "Will you fight them?" she asked. I shook my head. "No," I said. "If they make me choose between my kids and my title, I'll choose my kids every time." For a moment, the only sound was the dishwasher humming in the background. "You say that now," she murmured. "But what about 6 months from now?" "A year." I stepped closer, my voice steady. "I walked away once. I'm not walking away again. I'd rather lose my company than lose this." Hannah searched my eyes, looking for cracks in my resolve. Whatever she saw must have been enough, because she finally nodded. "Then I hope they're ready for you tomorrow," she said quietly. That night, as I tucked Finn into bed, he looked up at me sleepily. "Will you still be here tomorrow?" he whispered. I brushed the hair from his forehead. "Always," I said. And for the first time, I meant it. The boardroom felt like a battlefield. But home felt like another planet. When I pulled into Hannah's driveway that evening, the weight of the day settled on my shoulders. The vote was tomorrow. By this time next week, I could be out of the company I built from scratch. And yet, as I stepped out of the car, I realized my chest felt lighter than it had in years. The house was quiet when I entered, except for the faint sound of piano music drifting from upstairs. I followed it like a thread, careful not to make the stairs creak. Finn was sitting on the bench, his small fingers moving across the keys. The melody was hesitant, halting in places, but beautiful in its own way. I leaned against the doorframe, listening. "Claire de Lune again?" I asked softly. Finn jumped slightly, then turned his head. "You scared me," he said, his voice still tinged with sleepiness. "Sorry," I said with a smile. "That was amazing." He gave a shy little shrug, his fingers still hovering over the keys. "Are you practicing for school?" He nodded. "There's a recital next month." "I wouldn't miss it for the world," I said. For a moment he didn't answer. Then so quietly I almost missed it. He murmured, "I know." A lump rose in my throat. 6 weeks ago, he wouldn't even look at me. Now he believed at least a little that I'd stay. "You're still in your work clothes." I turned to see Hannah standing in the hallway, arms folded loosely. "You didn't have to come straight here," she said. "Yes, I did," I replied simply. She tilted her head, studying me. "You really have changed," she said finally. The words caught me off guard. I'm trying," I admitted. "God knows I've got a lot to make up for." She smiled faintly. "Keep showing up, Evan. That's all they need. That's all I need." As Finn began the song again, I sat cross-legged on the floor outside his room, letting the music fill the quiet house. For the first time in years, I felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be. The vote came in at 9:43 a.m., 7 in favor, 6 against. Campus family. First was officially approved. For a moment, I just sat there staring at the boardroom table, as if the grain of the wood might shift and spell out the words for me. "You did it," Victoria said softly from across the room. But I shook my head. We did it, because it wasn't just my victory. It belonged to every exhausted parent in this company. Every child who would finally see their mom or dad at the dinner table. And selfishly, it belonged to Finn, Liam, and Noah. By afternoon, I was standing on a grassy hill outside Seattle, Natalie by my side, the boys running ahead through the open field. The campus was still under construction, but the steel skeletons of the buildings were up cranes, hovering like giant birds in the distance. "This is it," I said quietly. "The place where we start over." Natalie didn't answer right away. She watched Finn chase Noah around a pile of dirt, both of them laughing in the crisp autumn air. "You really believe this will work?" she asked finally. "Not just for the company," I said. "For us." "Non." Liam came running up, clutching a wildflower he'd yanked from the ground. "Here," he said breathlessly, handing it to Natalie. She smiled down at him, then glanced at me with a look I couldn't quite read. We walked toward the largest building, its glass walls reflecting the cloudy sky. "This'll be the childcare center," I explained to the boys. "There'll be music rooms, science labs, and a library where you can read all day if you want." Noah's eyes lit up. "Can we come here too?" "Anytime," I said. "This is for families. That means you." Finn hung back, his small hand slipping into mine. "Did they really let you build this?" he asked softly. "They did," I said. And when he smiled up at me, I knew no boardroom approval could ever feel as sweet. As we stood there surrounded by the noise of construction and the laughter of 3 boys, I realized something. This wasn't just a campus. It was a chance to finally build a life worth living. The sun was sinking lower in the sky, casting long golden rays across the unfinished campus. Liam and Noah had found an old tire lying near the construction site and were rolling it back and forth, laughing so hard they kept collapsing into the grass. Finn sat beside me on a wooden pallet, his sketch pad balanced on his knees. His pencil moved quickly, leaving behind faint lines of a building that looked a lot like the glass structure rising in front of us. "You're pretty good at that," I said softly. He didn't look up. "Mom says practice makes perfect." "Your mom's right," I murmured. "But you know something, what? Even if it isn't perfect, it's still special, because you made it." For a moment he was quiet. Then he put the pencil down and turned to me. "Are you staying forever?" The question was so simple, so raw. It hit me like a punch to the chest. I could see the hope in his eyes, and the fear, too. He wasn't just asking if I'd be around next week or next month. He was asking if I'd stay through scraped knees and science fairs and heartbreaks. If I'd stay, even when it wasn't convenient. I pulled him close, my voice thick. "Forever and always," I whispered. "You mean it, I do," I said. "I missed too much already. I'm not missing another second." Just then, Liam and Noah ran over, flopping down beside us, grass stains streaking their jeans. "What are you two whispering about?" Liam demanded. "Nothing," Finn said quickly, though a tiny smile tugged at the corners of his mouth. I wrapped an arm around all 3 of them. "Come here, you little monsters," I said, pulling them into a hug. Liam giggled. Noah groaned. Finn stayed very still, his small hand gripping my sleeve. Natalie watched us from a few feet away, arms crossed loosely over her chest. For the first time in a long while, there was no tension in her face. Just a quiet, cautious warmth. "No, you look like you belong there," she said, when I finally let the boys go. "I do," I replied simply. "I just didn't realize it until now." As the boys went back to their game, Natalie walked closer. "This isn't going to be easy," she said softly. "I know," I said, "but I'm here for the hard parts, too." She searched my eyes for a long moment, as if trying to decide whether to believe me. Then almost imperceptibly, she nodded. That night, as we drove home, Liam and Noah fell asleep in the back seat, their heads leaning against each other. Finn was still awake, staring out the window at the stars. "Dad," he said softly. "Yeah, buddy. Promise you'll still be here tomorrow." I reached back and squeezed his hand gently. Tomorrow, the next day, every day. And for the first time in years, I wasn't just making a promise. I was keeping one. The morning was quiet. I sat on the back porch of my new home in Ballard, a mug of coffee cradled between my palms. The air smelled faintly of pine and rain. Through the open window, I could hear the sound of laughter, Liam and Noah arguing over who got to pour the pancake batter Finn's piano practice, drifting softly from the living room. 6 years ago, I thought success meant headlines and sold-out arenas, a packed schedule, a fat bank account. I thought I had to keep running faster, climbing higher, chasing something that always stayed just out of reach. But sitting here now, watching the light shift across the lawn, I realized I'd been wrong all along. True success isn't in the applause of strangers. It's in small, quiet moments like this. It's in knowing that the people who matter most can finally count on me to stay. Natalie stepped out onto the porch, holding a steaming plate of pancakes. Liam tried to flip one, she said with a wry smile. We almost lost a ceiling light. I chuckled. I'll teach him my technique later, I said. She raised an eyebrow. You can cook now. Not really, I admitted. But I'm learning. She shook her head, amused. Look at you, she murmured. Who would have thought? I stared out at the yard, where Finn had left his sketchbook open on the grass, pages fluttering in the breeze. Do you ever think about how different things could have been? I asked quietly. All the time, Natalie replied. But then I look at them. At you. She paused, her voice softening, and I think maybe this is exactly how it was meant to turn out. I reached for her hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. I thought success was fame, I said. But true success is being here under the same sky with them. Natalie smiled. Then you're finally rich in the right way, she said. As the boys burst through the screen door, tugging us back into the chaos of their pancake debate, I felt something settle in my chest. For the first time in years, I wasn't running anymore. I was home,